So everyone, we've ticked over to 10 o'clock here where we are, and obviously it's earlier or later depending on wherever you are in the world. It's nice to be part of a little bit of the global family, I suppose. And we're here today to talk about the book or the project initially. Basically, we'll do a little brief period of like explanations about the administrative side of things. And then we're going to start getting into discussing the different chapters of the book. Obviously, the schedule for reading, has been suggested and laid out. It's not something that you have to rigidly follow. Obviously, there's some flexibility, but for each video, each team of moderators. So myself, my name is Jeff Lloyd, and I'm here with
Michiko Ferraioli.
Michiko, and we're going to be the facilitators of this particular video, of this particular session. And there's different facilitators organized and scheduled for the different sessions. So today we're going to, as I said, we'll do a little bit of an administrative talk, and then we're going to start the discussions related to the first 7 chapters, which is the first section or the first subsection of the book. So just a reminder to put your microphones on mute when you join, and obviously just open up your microphone to talk when you want to participate and talk. So there's a few things I suppose we want to cover at first. We want to explain briefly about the vision behind the project. And just a reminder again, just put your microphones on mute until you want to speak. That'd be great. And so the project, the vision, Michiko and Margali, would you like to share a little bit your thoughts about the book club project and the 700 experiments as being the first book we're going to talk about as part of the book club?
Yep. So Magali and I, Michiko, we're the co-coordinators for the Bridge Book Club. And the idea is basically to connect consciousnesses who are interested in deepening their self-research through books of conscientiology. So the first book that we're going to focus on is 700 Conscientiology Experiments. It's one of the, I wouldn't say one of the first books, but one of the earlier books that were actually translated into English, making it accessible to people around the world. And the idea is to form really a study group that will connect all of us so that we can come together and debate the book, discuss the concepts, and share our experiences as well. And Magali, would you like to add to that, kind of what our vision is?
I think it's most of what you said, the idea of study conscientiology in the world and get the opportunity of this book that is in English and is a basic book of conscientiology. I think that is the most important thing, that we have a book and we can spread this holotocene as we do our researcher.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well, isn't it? The concept of a book club and kind of a study group to help research these things. Because if you pick up a book and it's 1,000 pages long and you go, wow, and maybe it's difficult to read it, to read the whole thing, to keep going. So when we start to do it together, there's a chance we can help support one another and also deepen our understanding of the work. So Michiko and her partner Fernandez have been great. They've created a fantastic website which you're seeing on screen now, and you've obviously registered into, and that site allows us to, and all of you, to ask questions, to help one another to answer those questions. And so Michiko is just going to slowly go through the site and show a little bit about it and how it's worked, because it's really there for us all to take better use of and use throughout this whole experiment that we're having in terms of reading and studying 700 experiments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to give just a brief introduction to the website if you're not familiar with it. On the home page is kind of where you can log in and create a registration. You only need to do this one time, and you'll be registered into the site. And then if you go to the, I'll go to the third tab here, the research area. In this area is where you can download the actual PDF version of 700 Conscientiology Experiments. We also have some other resources like the Glossary, which you probably will be using a lot.
Frequently, yes.
Yes, because as we'll talk a little bit about later, there are people from all levels and all different experiences with Conscientiology. So some people have been studying it for a while, others are quite new. And so there are a lot of terms or neologisms, as we call them, that you might not be familiar with. So we do have those resources here. You can download the glossary. We have a quick reference guide that will show you basically how to use the website. And we have a link here for other books in Conscientiology in English, available in English. And then we have a student progress tracker. So this is just like an Excel spreadsheet to help you keep track of where you are with your reading, because it's a large book, right? A large volume. So it just helps to keep track of where you are. Now, if you go to the book discussion tab, this is where you'll find the forum. So the way that our video courses are, they're not really courses, they're more like meetings where we come together to discuss different sections. They're basically divided by 13 areas, and in each area you have one or more section of the book, and within the section you have the various chapters. So if you click on the first section, which is tonight's course, unfortunately, it only shows one of the facilitators, but if you click on instructor, you'll be able to see the facilitators for this group. And you have the links. So once it's good to mention that we are recording all of the courses. Due to the time zone differences, everybody is located in different parts of the world. So we want it to be accessible to everybody. So we are recording each session, and then we're going to make it available on our YouTube channel, which is Isaac's YouTube channel. So
it's going to be there going forward as a reference point. So we're hoping that, people can join in halfway through, or maybe we've even finished reading this particular study group and we're on to other books, but people want to study 700, those resources will remain there and available. So it's kind of an ongoing project in that regard.
Yep.
So just be aware that you're being recorded. And obviously, if you're here participating, that's going to be available, and people are going to know and see that going forward.
Right. And then you will click on an enroll button here to access all of the information for each section. There's a link to the Zoom meeting, and then a link to the discussion forum. So we encourage everybody to be active in the forum. And it's separated by chapters for that section. And there's also one forum topic for synthesis sentence for conscientiality, or for whatever section we will be discussing. So we encourage everybody to go in there, write a synthesis sentence for that section, and also to post your comments or your questions for each chapter. And that will be monitored by all of the facilitators. So all of your questions will be responded to, if not in the forum, then in the meetings that we have on a monthly basis.
And it'll be great if you, as other individuals, also contribute in there, try to respond, try to help other participants. And so, it won't just be facilitators who are responding. You also give your own thoughts, give your own interpretations. You'll see that a lot of this stuff and Luz, if you could just put your microphone on mute as well, that would be great. And then just unmute yourself when you want to talk. And so put your own ideas in there. So it's all, the interesting thing about conscientiology, and it's one of the first things that is written, and one of the first chapters we're going to read about, is things are relative, right? So your interpretation will mature and change over time. and your own understanding will evolve, will grow. And so it's like that for everyone. So we all have our own interpretation of certain things, and that's just natural and a natural part of it. There's not just one correct interpretation. There can be lots of different interpretations, and it varies depending on the day and the moment and your level of understanding and experience in certain subjects. Some people have a lot of experience in some areas and other people not, so that's why we want to try to help each other and together move forward and deepen and understand things. So we want to try to create a nice supportive environment there.
That's right. So a little bit about our schedule. We do have 13 meetings that we're planning throughout the year. So what you want to do is try to keep up with the readings, try to read the chapters that are applicable to the section before we meet so that we can have a more meaningful and engaging discussion among us. And then this will also be uploaded to the website, so you'll be reminded on the dates of each meeting.
Very nicely organized, if I do say so on your behalf.
Thank you.
So there's one thing, I suppose, administrative wise, that it's always good to mention, you know, like, you know, in Conscientiology, we always talk, and this is one of the first chapters actually talks to this, about the principle of disbelief, right? So we always like to say, don't believe in anything, have your own experiences, and use this whole study group as a process of self-experimentation and self-research. One thing that was already touched on, but I just want to reinforce, is that there'll be a lot of new words that will come, and there's some of those literally will be words in English that you've just never heard of before, so you just need to look online and you'll find the definitions and dictionaries and stuff online. Others could be neologisms, which is new terminology, new words created within the sciences of Conscientiology. So in the 700 Experiments book itself, you'll find a glossary. It starts on page 43 and goes to page 61. Mashika also showed it to you on the website as well, in the book club website. There's also on page 61 of the PDF of 700 Experiments, you'll see acronyms and abbreviations that are used throughout the book as well. So sometimes you go, well, what's that? PC, what does that mean? You'll see what the definition of and the use of that term, that abbreviation, is in 700 Experiments. So you're going to be challenged, you're going to be stimulated, I should say, to look up meanings, look up Latin terms and definitions for certain Latin terms and phrases that are used throughout the book. This is very much in keeping with the style of the author, who, when he wrote the book, that was the style and the type of language that he wrote in Portuguese. So we've kept, to the degree possible, the same style. Even, for example, the capitalizations in the book, you know, what has a capital letter and what doesn't, we've taken directly from the original work in Portuguese and maintained the same styling in that regard in English. So you'll see in the book some phrases like human history, capital H and capital H. Why? Because that's how it was in the original Portuguese book. The author wanted to emphasize those things in that way. But we've also extended that to sciences. So in Portuguese, sciences, when they're written, are with a capital letter. In English, we use lowercase. We maintain the capitalization of sciences to maintain the coherence with the original work, but also to emphasize the value which we know the author gave to science. So we've maintained those style rules. So just a few things there to mention. So neologisms is just look up the glossary, and after a couple of times, you'll start to remember what those words are. And sometimes it's good to make notes on the pages themselves, or write your own collection of new words for you and their definitions that will help you to develop your mental dictionary. So that's something we really want to stimulate, is to help our creativity and new understandings of new ideas. You do that by oftentimes incorporating new words and vocabulary into your daily usage. So it's a great way to start to develop on that side of things.
That's right. Now, Magali, is there anything else that we've forgotten to mention in terms of the administrative side of things?
You know, the time thing we have speak of, we have talked about, maybe the time is something we could talk about.
Okay. So yeah, it's obviously, you know, it's a global project. This one, we have people from all around the world calling in and participating in this work. So some people are, obviously we can't accommodate everyone. The world is round, there's 24 hours. Some people are asleep now. And so apologies for those people. We've done the best we can, given where different people are located. But obviously it's a challenge we have, and hence that's another reason why things are recorded and will be available online for later reference for those who can't make it live during the sessions. So that's just one of the challenges that we have, and we you know, we've done the best we can, but it's not, you know, we can't unfortunately have everyone live with us now. That's just the way it is. But another challenge we have is that you know, after many decades of working with conscientiology, we know that it's a real challenge to continue and to persist. There's a phrase in one of the chapters we're studying today that says, insist, don't desist, don't desist, don't give up. And that's something to remember. Inevitably, you're going to encounter challenges as we go through the reading, because what happens is with these new thoughts and these new interpretations and new ideas, everything starts to change around you, inside of yourself, and then the positive repercussions expand beyond you. And so it's always good to de-dramatize, to keep things simple, to keep things, to quote a lovely little video on YouTube, low, like keep it really tranquil and calm, and just keep going, like just persist. There's always those challenges that come that you want to try to confront, to not let the challenges overcome you. We're all able to rise and meet the challenges. It's just a little bit of application, and also a little bit of few wee tweaks in terms of around how we're interpreting certain challenges that come up. So try to maintain a sort of a slight sense of optimism in relation to things, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And not be too hard about things. We've got to develop a real degree of flexibility when dealing with these things, but maturity and discernment in relation to things. So don't underestimate the challenge of the work, I suppose, is one thing we want to make you aware of. And also one thing we can do throughout the course is little moments of energy exercises. So you'll be wise. We recommend that anytime things are a little bit more, you're feeling more pressure, a little bit more difficulty, please do feel free to work with your energies, to do your vibrational state, which is a technique we'll explain at some stage, and it's in the book as well, and online you can find out information.
Yeah, so it's really important to always be aware of your energies and how you're feeling. And then, as Jeff mentioned, we'll probably explain that in another video for those who are new and don't really know much about vibrational state yet.
Yeah.
But it's an important tool that we use in conscientiology.
Yeah, it's one of the best. It's the best form of self-defense we've found for an energetic self-defense to maintain your immunity and balance in relation to the things. And last but not least, from an administrative point of view, is please, as we already mentioned, but we just want to reiterate, please ask questions, participate, share your thoughts and your interpretations, whether that be here during these videos or online in the forum. It'll be great to see you posting there and participating there and sharing your knowledge and your experiences. That's what it's there for. So is there any questions from your guys' side? Anything else you'd like to mention, Margaret? If there's something else you can think of as well, feel free to unmute yourself, your microphone, and ask any question you like.
Do you have any questions coming in from the chat?
No, I think Cool. So, look, we'll start with sort of a debate discussion around the first chapter. So the first chapter is page 65 of the PDF, and it's a technique to critically read this book. And Mishika, what called your attention in relation to this particular chapter?
Yeah, so I think the word critical in English that has various meanings. It could mean something very important or urgent, but it can also mean something to do with like discernment and questioning things and not believing everything you see or hear. So one of the pillars, I guess you could call it, of conscientiology is what we call the principle of disbelief. And I think it's explained very well in this first chapter, and that's what called my attention. So the principle of this disbelief is kind of mentioned in various ways, but it pretty much says, don't believe in anything that you hear or see, even in what we are presenting today. Experiment and have your own experiences. So that is something very key to remember, and it's a pillar of conscientiology.
Yeah, and there's and in 700, it's people who already have experience of conscientiology will know many of these ideas, but the way that it's written and presented sometimes in 700 is really interesting. So here, for example, at the end of the experiments paragraph, the author notes, paper accepts anything written on it, and hence it's worthwhile to forget all beliefs. And I like that phrase, because if we think, paper, you can write anything, anyone can write anything they want on paper, and there's no discernment applied to that. Like, it could be anything, it could be fake, it could be false. And we were chatting earlier today about how important this sense of criticism and discernment is in relation to the news and the societies of today, where there's so much false information spread. Sometimes it's difficult to know what is true, what is false. Like, journalists have to fact check one another and the people in the public eye who are presenting certain points of view. So there's all sorts of learnings and lessons that we can take just from this first page to apply in our everyday life.
That's right. The application of the principle of disbelief is, in my opinion, is prevalent in our society today. And as Jeff mentioned, you can use it in various aspects of your daily life. So is there anyone out there who would like to share your thoughts about it, your
questions,
experiences, or ask questions?
Is there anything on the page, for example, that got your attention? Feel free, please go ahead. If anyone's out there wants to raise any thoughts.
I just want to say, we forgot to say that is videotaping, no? I don't remember you saying that, Michiko and Jeffrey. Did you?
Yeah, we mentioned that. So it's being recorded. So, if you voice yourself there and unmute your microphone and share your thoughts, it's going to be recorded for posterity's sake.
Is disturb you with something?
Hi there. So what was that? Can someone have a question or a comment there?
Hi, can you listen?
Yes.
My name is Pamela. I'm speaking from Russian, but I'm a Brazilian girl. This is my first time in the Conscientiology and with the studies. And normally I'm watching videos in YouTube and listening. First, I went to
How you meet English?
Spiritism
Your
from Allan
history
Kardec.
with English.
And for me, the most good thing, interesting thing is this principle to don't believe anything. Because when you believe that much, you can be blind and don't see what the human aspects when the people are using spiritual knowledge. That's all.
No, that's really important, because historically on the planet, we've had a lot of people stimulating belief and wanting you to believe, and by that I mean kind of just accept what's being presented, and we individually don't evolve particularly well in those circumstances. We might get to a certain point, but then we're always limited by our own passivity, our own sort of laziness mentally, and we need to maintain this posture of questioning and interrogating. And like, you know, if you read journalism and articles, the best journalists question and they go deeper into things and they bring new ideas and new information. And so by applying this posture, this attitude, you're doing yourself a great favor in terms of shaping and changing the dynamic of your own evolution. And it's worth just mentioning briefly here, like there's a comment here in the ignorance paragraph that talks about leading edge relative truths. You know, everything that we're going to talk about here is relative. You know, it's evolving. Our understanding of it is evolving. And it itself, what we're studying, you know, can be renewed, revised. Nothing that's written here is sacred, right? It's a set of ideas that we need to experiment with and see what works, see where things need to be improved. The author, in the last paragraph here, he actually says, you know, start to apply this principle of disbelief in the critical reading of this book. It benefits you and everyone else. And also, prior on in the book, in the introduction, he's asking for criticisms and for feedback.
Yeah.
And your interpretation and understanding of the thing. So that's really important, Pamela. Thanks for your contribution there. Does anyone else want to discuss anything, raise something important that this brought to them, this particular page? Yeah, Flavia, we haven't asked people to introduce themselves. We didn't want to force that every week and every month. We wanted people to naturally expose themselves whenever they wanted. We decided not to do that as a systematic kind of a thing. We think we'll get to know each other through the forums and through the meetings online. But if you want to speak at any time, feel free to say, you know, a little bit about yourself when you do that. Up to you.
So just for everyone, I think everybody can see the chat, right? And the questions are just that?
Yeah, so the chat, there's a chat window in Zoom that you can open up. Just make sure you've clicked on it so you can see, you can ask questions in that group chat, or you can also ask questions here. And so, you know, we've got a team supporting the project. Fernandez is already helping out, answering questions down there on the chat, and Marguerite's helping obviously as well. And so there's a team supporting the whole project, and I should say that there's going to be different facilitators and moderators throughout the different videos. So you're always going to have different people giving their interpretations of the certain things as well.
And not to mention the extra physical team that is present as well with all of us. So.
Yeah. Guys, for that particular first chapter, is there any other thoughts you have you wanna talk about? Silence gives consent. That means we're likely to roll on to the second chapter. You'll find naturally that some chapters there's much more to discuss and others not necessarily so much, but please really do feel free to express yourselves whenever you like. So this second chapter, okay, I suppose we could briefly talk about the section itself. So this section is Conscientiality, and the subsection is Conscientiometrology or Conscientiological measures. So these first 7 chapters are dedicated, and it's interesting they're the first ones in the book, and they're dedicated to the study of measuring consciousness. And so you'll see within this book, you know, like it's described here as a manual of pragmatic solutions for a consciousness's multidimensional life. We know later on in another chapter, there's more than 300 tests within this book. So there's a lot of measurement that is available to be done to you. And that's something that you individually do to the depth that you want to do it. So if you want to go really deep in your self-research, you can. If you want to just do a more lighter reading of the work, you can also do that as well. But obviously, we think we're here to try to accelerate the rhythm of our evolution, and hence we sort of stimulate more a deeper reading and self-questioning of this book. But what I like here in this third paragraph here, the research paragraph on this particular page, is that we're trying to fecundate predisposed minds to 4 types of research. So with this book, multidimensional research. So we talked about extraphysical helpers, the extraphysical consciousnesses who are around us all the time, right? Whoever they be, they change from moment to moment. But we are living a multidimensional life, and the challenge is to work within that parameter and to stop being naive and about that. That's the big challenge. So another type of research is the holosomatic, which is talking to the different bodies we have of manifestation. So not just the physical body, the other bodies, which we can talk about in more detail. And then also parapsychic research. So how many inspirations do you have? How do you feel energies? Already in the class, what have you connected with and what are you feeling inside of yourself and energetically? So bioenergetically, what perceptions do you have? This is really important. And at first, I remember 20 more or so years ago when I started studying these things, I felt some energies, but I didn't know what I was feeling. I could go to the supermarket and feel uncomfortable and upset and irritated, but I didn't know why. Now, a lot of years and a lot of practices later, I understand those things, but this is practical day-to-day research that you can do as part of the work. So the last thing I wanted to mention here before, we ask you guys for opinions, was this phrase here, which is in italicized in the consciousness paragraph. The intimate world of the consciousness is much more interesting than the external universe. So you inside of yourself are much more fascinating, richer, full of nuances and information than all the external universe. And I think that's true. I think our own intimate micro-universe is very rich. But in what we usually see is we don't value that highly enough. We value things external to ourselves much more highly than we do the things inside of ourselves. And so one of the challenges we want to do in this work is to help us, I suppose, enter into a deeper contact with our own self-knowledge, our own self-experience, and so on. And so that was just one phrase that caught my attention. But how about you guys, Mashiko or anyone else? What thoughts do you have?
Yeah, I think all of that, as well as how this chapter is about techniques. So as you know, and we'll talk about a little bit more, is the scientific approach of conscientiology and what makes it so practical, and things like tools that they offer, like techniques that you can use for self-research. They're very practical, so you can actually experiment. They're meant to be for your experimentation, to understand yourself in a deeper way, in a very scientific, structured way, so that you can then learn at a deeper level about your consciential micro-universe, and then to help others. So that's kind of what...
That phrase, the consciential micro-universe, when the first time I heard that, I went, what a brilliant concept, what a lovely idea. Like, inside of yourself as an individual, consider yourself on the level of like being a micro-universe. Like, how many past lives have you had? How deep and nuanced and rich is your internal manifestation? we usually don't value those things anywhere near as much as I think we should. And so this idea of a micro universe, I think, gives you an inkling of the amount of information and knowledge that you have inside of yourself that probably you're not exploring to the degree that you could. So yeah, the technical approach helps a lot. We try to minimize any belief or dependency, and that's what Conscientiology is about. And that's why these things are free and open. So these books are available for free. This course and information is all available for free, and that's people to be able to do as much self-service as they can. We're just here to try to facilitate and help people in their understanding where needed. Otherwise, go ahead. You know, like there's the only thing stopping you is yourself, really, in that regard, in terms of evolution.
Right. So yeah, does anyone have anything else to add about this chapter?
Hi. Can I ask a question? Hello. Okay, so what I noticed is that while I was reading the book, like just the section, I was getting a lot of anxiety, a lot of energy, that type of thing. And even today, joining the meeting, it was sort of coming back. And there are so many things going through my mind at the moment, but one of them is what you were just talking about with that consciential micro-universe, right? And the idea that what we're putting out, we're attracting, which I think is mentioned in the book as well. You know, the people that are around us sort of determine our reality. I don't have the book in front of me right now. So I'm just wondering whether we can sort of talk about that a little bit,
Yeah,
get some clarity.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So look, one thing that's really important is to start to question what is purely ours and what is influencing us, but is out there external to us, as in the environment. So when we say that life is multidimensional, we are saying that there's other consciousnesses around us, and they are able to influence us. And so the key concept through that is the idea of a ethosing, which we're going to talk about in one of the chapters very soon. But there's ways of communication that happen, and they can appear invisible, but they're so real, they're so clear and so palpable. But many times we confuse our own internal processes, our own emotions, my anxiety, with things that actually, it's the anxiety of an extra physical consciousness. So, you know, one of us, Mashiko, desomas and is there extra physically next to me. Right? I don't see her anymore, like I'm seeing her here now, but her presence is almost equally as strong as it is with her sitting here now. So the way she is feeling, right, and the way I'm feeling, I am influencing her, she influences me. All of us, and so that's a very clear example, but all of us are connected. You just need to think about one person and you can connect with them.
Mm.
Your energy, your thoughts, your emotions go to them, and vice versa. And so this discernment between what is yours in terms of this anxiety and what is from other consciousnesses around you is something we have to consider seriously, and try to delineate, demarcate what is mine, what is someone else's, because it's very real. I've seen it countless times. I've experienced it countless times, feeling things where my emotions get exacerbated beyond what's just mine or influenced. And so once you start to understand that that actually exists and start to incorporate that into your day-to-day, things get clearer for you, things get better, but they also get a little bit more challenging because you have to take more responsibility for everything that you are manifesting. So if you allow the influence of someone else to enter into you too much, that's your responsibility, that's your choice. you're not putting the limit on that thing.
I think
So it's all about boundaries.
But I also think, Kristen, there's another aspect to that, and that's when you start to really do deep self-research, you're starting to kick up a lot of dust, I guess you could say, not only within yourself, but around your surroundings, with the extra physical consciousnesses that are surrounding you. So you're starting to shake things up. And that can be a bit uncomfortable in the beginning, but it's part of the process. So you should know that it's normal. It happens. It's part of the process, and that's where, you know, don't give up as long as you're feeling good. Do your energetic work for sure. We talked about the prophylaxis, so work with your energies, you know, and that's going to help you a lot as well.
I mean, we can share personal stories of similar kinds of things. Everyone has gone through similar kinds of things. You know, I think Margaret's going to share something here.
Yes, I think also the group helps a lot, because it's normal, this kind of pressure. We see lots of things in this book that can help us to expand our mind, our consciousness, our lucidity, but also there is lots of pressures to us to not follow that, because you know, you see lots of things that you haven't done, and you still, you know, at least for me, that I'm still, you know, catching up or trying to evolve on that. Or things are a challenge for me, so that generates a lot of pressures that is automatically in my mind, and I cannot clearly understand that, but the pressure is there. I think with time and with the group, things can become more easily, you know. In the beginner is always more pressure.
Yeah, and that's a positive thing. It sounds like it's a bad thing, but it's a positive thing. And why is that? Because it shows you that you're changing, or it shows you, and sometimes it's that you have a lot of potential to change. And the rational, the logical explanation for why we have pressure in those moments is there's a couple of things. We ourselves have some weak traits or some cracks in our personality that expose us to that pressure, and we haven't fixed that. So that pressure actually shows us, helps us to see what we need, where we need to grow, which is kind of a favor that the pressure, you know, it's something helpful that the pressure is doing for us by showing us that thing. But obviously, you know, we need to stay balanced enough during that process, right? Like not dramatize things a lot, and just keep calm and keep going and keep working. And so we see that dynamizes our evolution, our growth, because later on the same pressure comes and you're not disturbed by it.
Yeah.
Right? So you start to see that, but it's only through your own self-experimentation. Like this, what we're saying now is theory. And the most important part of theory is actually the practice, like putting that theory into practice. And then you'll see and you go, okay, because the logic is, you know, there's consciousness of different types. There's positive ones who want you to grow and to evolve and be independent and strong. There's ones who are kind of a little bit mischievous and problematic, and there's ones who are kind of just really negative and pathological. And we've been the worst variety, and we're slowly improving. So when we go to change, when we change, things reverberate around us. It's not just saying we change the world and everything becomes better, but we can at least change ourselves to the point and generate some consequences around us. So when we generate those consequences, we get a counterflow. A counterflow is a flow against us. So if you're moving in a good direction, slightly more specific and advanced for you, there's going to be a counterflow. There's going to be good people who are supporting you, but the majority of what you're going to perceive is resistance, is pressure, is difficulties, is anxiety, is whatever it is triggered in you.
Yeah.
And so we have to be cognizant of that and continue, at least in my experience and my choices, is to continue in that way. I don't want to give in. I don't want to give up. I don't want that pressure to get the better of me. And I want to continue to grow by engaging like at the front line of that particular process, as opposed to, like we just read in the first chapter, you know, evolving in a kind of in a mediocre way, in a mediocre flow.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge, you know, and we're free to do whatever we want and respond in whatever way we want in that regard.
No, thanks, guys. That's really good.
Thanks, Kristen. So we'll move ahead to the next.
Is there any,
section.
just before we do that, is there any other thoughts, things that come to mind that anyone wants to share or ask about? Please, we'll give you a few seconds to unmute yourself and to express yourself.
Hi guys, just a comment here. Can you guys maximize the screen where you have the 700 experiments page open?
Yeah, sure. Is that
So if there is anyone that is not able to see the page, let us know. You might need to change to the switch.
Yeah, there we go.
Share. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Fernandez. Any other observations, guys? Okie dokie. So this third chapter, the theories, so this is a word you'll read and you'll go, what is theories? It doesn't exist in English. It does exist in English now. The glossary, what theories is? It's a neologism that is a combination of the two words theory and practice. So it's an idea of emphasizing the importance of putting into practice the theories. And this particular chapter talks about the theories of conscientiometrology, or this measurement of consciousness. So there's another book and a whole other organization dedicated to studying that, and it's called Conscious, and we've already done a couple of courses online of what's called the Conscientiogram without drama. But here, Mashiko, what called your attention, or people out there, what called your attention about this particular page? Questions you may have or important points you want to discuss and emphasize in the video, feel free.
So while we're waiting for people to unmute, I think for myself, really, it's the theory and practice. One of the things that I enjoy about studying conscientiology and self-research is the practice side of things, that you can actually experiment with the theories and the techniques and the tools, and you can actually see the results. And what's important really are the results of the assistance that you're giving, and those signatures that you're leaving behind, how you're affecting people and how you're growing for yourself.
I'm just reading here as well. One of the main benefits of conscientiometrology is to help you to identify your aptitudes, your skills, your abilities, the tools that you have inside yourself to help you to move ahead with your evolution. So that's one of the key things here. And we can do that theoretically through the tests. But the great thing about the tests you'll see in this book, they're not just theoretical. They make you reflect, and in that process of reflection, you already start to change your structure inside of yourself. So it actually becomes, even just doing the study group will be an exercise in theories. It will be an adventure, sort of a journey within yourself. And one of the lovely phrases I like in this book is with number 10, further down the page there. at the end of number 10 is this idea. The text was written with 1.5 line spacing, so whomever is interested can read between the lines. So what this gives us the idea of is, again, it presents us with the relativeness of all of this work, of all of these ideas. It shows this kind of layers to it. And you can go deeper, or you can stay more on the first couple of layers.
Surface, yeah.
So it's up to you how deeply you go in all of this. How deeply do you apply the practice of these theories? And this last one, number 12 here on this page, whoever does not practice verb action. So this is another new word. So verb action, so, saying and doing, right? Like putting the thing into action. Whoever does not practice verb action is an arrow at an intersection, right? It's pointing in some direction, but not that you haven't followed. So a flaw is a simple weak trait, a vice is a chronic weak trait. So even within yourself and the things where you've got problems, some things can be quite light, quite easy to resolve. Other things can be much deeper, harder to resolve. Doesn't mean you can't resolve them, it just means the challenge is bigger. And so the challenge is there for all of us, regardless of who we are, is to put those things into action. And there's a few tests here, number 9, that help us with that.
Yeah.
I'll have a comment there.
Yes. The education part, I don't know if you can move to education. It's here, education. Yeah. That caught my attention when I was reading. The fundamental goal of consciential methodology is to identify the evolutionary aptitudes of the consciousness and to establish a self-programmed education for evolution through the intermissive course. But this part about establish a self-programmed education for evolution, I don't know why, but I had an expansion, consciousness expansions about that part of education for evolution. That's what we do here in Conscientiology, and that is all this book is about, And so I just want to do this comment.
I really like that phrase as well, and I think it's perhaps the key one for this particular chapter. The self-programmed education for evolution, right? So self-programmed, it's not someone else telling you how to evolve, it's not someone else giving you telling you how to do it. It's self-programmed, you with yourself taking control of your evolutionary process. And that for me is wonderful, right? There's lots of ways to evolve. People have evolved to extremely high levels on this planet before Conscientiology existed. So Conscientiology, though, what it's trying to do is study these sciences in a way that allows us to systematize the knowledge, the multidimensional knowledge and the techniques to try to go even faster. And so there's lots of lines of knowledge that have good information. Conscientiology is kind of a synthesis of a lot of the leading lines of knowledge. If you look at the number of resources in the bibliography, this particular book has over 5,000 books in the bibliography. So that's a lot of ideas from lots of lines of knowledge being brought together and try to be presented in a coherent way, in a systematic way.
I think we have a question.
No, there's not. I haven't seen any chat come through.
I do have a question here.
Yeah, Fernandez.
So one of the items is the number 4 here in this chapter is the proof. Yeah. So being the consciousness such a subjective topic for self-study, how can you have this proof?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's essentially it's impossible to overcome the subjective factor in an evaluation. So you've just got to live with it, right? You can refine, do it again, revisit the same thing, try to get better informed about that particular point or that particular issue, but it's always going to remain subjective. So the thing about consciousness research, like I can study Mashiko. Who's Mashiko? Okay, how does she work? I can get a degree of knowledge and information about this consciousness here. But it's always going to be a little bit, and it's always going to be my take on her. You know, science is not impartial. Science is not completely open as theoretically it should be. We can't overcome our subjective, well, some people can to a greater degree, others to a lesser degree, right? But just because we're a scientist, you know, doesn't mean that we don't have beliefs. There's many people who are very religious who are scientific, you know. So this just starts to show some of the complexity of what consciousness can be. So this subjective factor, just returning to your question, it's inevitable. The point is we need to try to expand the breadth and the broadness of our understanding. And the best thing we can do in that regard is be the subject of our own research. So we're both the instrument that is doing the research, and we are the subject or the object of our research. And then it's an iterative process. We can go again and again and again, but deepening. So using an analogy of the onion, layer after layer after layer after layer. It's all onion, so that's all me, right? I'm an onion, but how many layers have I managed to understand, to reveal, to engage with? So even though it's subjective, it doesn't mean that we can't get more precise and better in our self-understanding and our self-knowledge. But it's a challenge. We have to keep revisiting. And, you know, these techniques that we're presenting here are pretty good in that regard. But it is a challenge. You know, most people don't want self-knowledge. They're kind of afraid of it. And this is why we need this courage to do the self-experimentation. What other thoughts do we have?
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Ulysses. Hi.
Hello. Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, Michiko. Yes, very good to see you, everybody here. Well, in this point, it's written here, it is very difficult to eliminate the subjective factor of evaluation in conscientiometric tests, okay? But I don't know if the intention is to eliminate the subjective factor. I think that's the point. I think, it's my opinion, that we should not eliminate. So I have a question here. What is this subjective factor? And if we should try to eliminate it, because when it's written, it's very difficult to eliminate. What does it mean? That we should eliminate, we should try to eliminate or not? You see?
Yeah, good interpretation.
Because in general, in science, in conventional science, that's a kind of goal, to eliminate the subjective factor. But in conscientiology, we should really try to eliminate, or we should try to include, or to consider this subjective factor with another level of quality, or to change this subjective factor. I think that this is a very important point, and we should understand and discuss this point. Because if we don't understand this point, we will repeat this statement that it's very difficult to eliminate the subjective factor. We should repeat this sentence, this statement, or not. Do you understand the point?
Absolutely.
It is something to be eliminated. or not?
Our tendency is to want to fix things, right? And so, it looks like we should eliminate that. Like you could read that sentence and think, well, maybe I should eliminate it. But I think what you're raising is really important. I think it's much smarter and probably much more realistic to refine and qualify the subjective factor of our evaluation to end up with a better evaluation. But I don't think we are going to do that by eliminating the subjective factors. I don't think we can.
And I think it's also when you take these tests, for example, the Conscientiogram, and you're entering these questions, a little bit, what gives it a little bit more objectivity is what's the actual result. So you can answer the question subjectively and say, yes, I do this or I don't do that. However, what is the evidence to back this up? And that brings, in my opinion, a little bit more of objectivity when you actually have evidence to back up how you're answering the question. And then the other thing I think is that it's repeatable, right? So experiments are repeatable. They're meant to be repeatable. Are you getting consistent results? So that might be another way to bring a little more objectivity into it. But to that point, yes, Ulysses, I agree. Should we be aiming to completely eliminate the subjective factor when you are doing self-research?
It's
so
good.
Your opinion and your interpretation, that's actually what the focus is.
It's good to have a little bit of a detachment and a little bit of like an ability to have an overview of yourself. So this will be part of refining and qualifying the subjective nature of an evaluation. Have some sort of bit of a different perspective on the thing as opposed to just being immersed in your own world and not really having a vision of a broader reality or scope of your manifestation. So just some ideas perhaps there of that. But I think we're on the same page, Ulysses. But
see, I have just a point of view. If subjectivity is very far from reality, for instance, my self-knowledge, if it is very far from my reality, so it should be avoided. But if somebody is very close to his personal reality, it should be included. So if I think in this way, I should find like a gradient, like 2 points, and there are many intermediate possibilities. So in conventional science, we should avoid subjectivity. But if we come closer to our reality and even to understanding in general, subjectivity should be very close to something that we think is true. So I think that this should be a relative point of view, but it's very important to clarify and to move slowly in this kind of discussion.
Because it's impossible, isn't it? We all have a sense of identity about ourselves, and we can't exclude that from our own world, is it? But I think perhaps this sentence is challenging us as readers to try to improve the quality of our evaluation, and then in that iterative process, get to a more precise diagnosis of ourselves and a deeper self-knowledge. That's the way I would sort of take that, I suppose, in summing up that one.
Okay, thank you.
Good discussion.
Any other thoughts out there, or shall we move on to the next one? Cool.
So the next chapter is Foundations of Conscientiology and Projectiology. I think this might bring up a few discussions and questions. So I'd like to ask the audience here, what were your thoughts? What were some of the concepts from this chapter that called out to you, and if you could share a little bit about that, or any questions you might have had. How about for you, Jeff?
Yeah. So for me, one of the main things that comes up on this page is the emphasis on consciential energies. So as an individual consciousness, we are always dealing with energies. Here in this body, out of the body, if we're having out of body experiences or whatever. And the key thing here is like to understand is we're constantly producing I call it like a broadcast signal. You're constantly emitting information to the environment around you. Every consciousness is constantly doing this. So we're always absorbing those broadcasts from others, and we are always producing that information and releasing that information into the environment. So it makes us reflect and go, what is the quality of the thosenes, right, that I am producing? So a thosene is something the consciousness always produces, and it's a new word that's made up of thoughts, sentiments or emotions, and energy. And as a consciousness, we are always emitting and producing those things constantly, all the time, every second. Even when we're asleep, we're still producing thosenes. So this is the broadcast, this is the signal we're putting into the environment. And then everything comes as a result in a flow of that. Synchronicities, whether they be good ones or bad ones, the connections we have, the moments of inspiration or the lack of inspiration we may have. So this concept of thosene, for me, it's a foundation piece for studying consciousness and for understanding ourselves in this multidimensional universe with different people. How about you? Or comments?
And I have a comment here, because this chapter is the basis, and it's so good for people that is for the first time in Conscientiology. It has synthesis everywhere, and talk a lot about Conscientiology and how there is a, let me see here, just because it's down, if you can roll it down in the second reality, when he talks about a consciousness is not the energosoma or the energetic body, as Jeffrey was saying, because sometimes we go out of the body and we look at that and say, wow, now is me, is more me. But surely that is the second reality. We are not our psychosoma also. So we are much more than that. So our consciousness is bigger than our bodies. So that idea gives us, amplify our idea of what we are in reality. We are not, it's like how it's this movie, that's movie that he is in a second life also. Anyway, that is what caught my attention here, that it gives lots of tips in a synthesis in that page about conscientiology and consciousness.
Yeah, definitely, Magali. I agree. This is a great page, especially if you're new to Conscientiology, to get a quick view of the main, the basic concepts of Conscientiology and Projectiology. So it's a really good for if you are new to 700 Experiments or Conscientiology, to really study this page. Use the glossary. There's a lot of neologisms. But it'll give you the basic ideas in order to understand the science.
And one of the favorite words I have is this idea of cosmoethics, and it's introduced here on this page. And, you know, combining, we talked about that broadcast signal, the energies you're producing, and improving the quality of that, because obviously you improve the quality of that, things start to flow better from there. And we do that largely through the idea of cosmoethics. So cosmoethics allows us to develop our own, I suppose, degree of connection with the broader universe. And also, you know, we can develop a lot more self-trust and knowledge of ourselves through the application and study of cosmoethics. So it's a really important concept that's introduced here in this chapter. And there's one last phrase there, point 17. Mutations. By being a lucid conscient, or, you know, lucid into physical consciousness, combining consciential energies with cosmoethics, we dynamize mutations in our own evolution and in the evolution of others. So if we move, other things move as well. Maybe not immediately, maybe not exactly at the same pace and the same rhythm, or maybe not always smoothly, but things move. And so that's why when we say, you know, the best thing you can do to help other people, and it seems we're here to evolve by helping other people. It's the best theory we have, is that we be a better example. And so this is all about qualifying your manifestation. And that's really what I suppose studying consciousness and studying projectiology and conscientiology helps us to do. And this lays out some of the key points as we've been discussed. Does anyone have any ideas about this? They want to question or query?
Magali is moving us along as the moderator.
Yeah, I have a question or just something to add about what Jeff has mentioned before. Is like about our dosins and the footprint we imprint in the planet with our existence and what we do, what we say, and what we think. And the item 8, if you scroll up, is like we evolve by serving others. So this is all related to what we were talking about, and I think that for me that's the main topic. That's the key in our evolution, and very important in this chapter here.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks for the input there, Fernandez. And the next chapter, chapter 5, I want to call on Ulysses to give his take on this one if he can. It's a little bit out of the blue, Ulysses, but it's the practical formula of cosmo-consciousness. So I know you're a man who studies extensively in that area. And so I'd like to hear your take on this particular chapter and see if you've got any thoughts that you want to share with the team.
While Ulysses is preparing himself, I want to say something because it's something about this cosmo consciousness. When I was reading it, it came up. It's like in this book, what I always have is that when I'm reading 700 experiments, I have little expansion of my consciousness. It's not a cosmo consciousness, but it's a little piece of expanding my consciousness and understand better evolution and understand better myself and understand new things for me, or even things that I already known, but I'm bringing again to my lucidity. So it's not cosmo consciousness, but it's expansions, and I think that is good while we are having this book and reading this book, that we are gonna find a lots of expansion of consciousness. That's what I want to.
Well, Magali is saying something very interesting because cosmo consciousness in general, people consider it a very top phenomenon. But if we consider the possibility of that we can have intermediate experiences, like intermediate expansions of consciousness. So it should be very accessible to everyone to understand this possibility.
And they can be very fast, right? The expansions of consciousness can be like instantaneous, momentaneous. You capture sometimes I think when we have a new understanding on one single idea in a flash, it's kind of like we've expanded, we've captured that thing, and we've incorporated that back into ourselves. And so when we recuperate a con or a unit of lucidity, for me, it's kind of associated with this process.
Yes. Well, it should be very interesting to hear questions about it, but I'd like to make a question. If anyone has any experience that should ask about any other phenomenon, for instance, if you have an intuition, it is this. It should be considered an expansion or consciousness or not. If you have a kind of new perception, it should be considered an expansion or consciousness or not. So the question is, what is an expansion of consciousness? I understand here that Professor Waldo, he decided to write this chapter and to put it right in the beginning of the book, because it is important. It is important. So I would like to understand why this chapter, this conception, this phenomenon is so important to be here written in the beginning of the book, like a practical formula.
I think
So
for me,
what do you think about it? Why this point is so important to be written here?
and also within this particular section, right? Consciential metrology, consciential measures. So in answer to your question, one possibility, and then please other people contribute your thoughts as well, is that a cosmo-consciousness gives us a better frame of reference for what we're measuring. It gives us maybe a broader range of stuff, and then we can contextualize ourselves within that and see, well, okay, my normal manifestation is limited in what ways compared to that expansion. And then that leads us to this paragraph of priorities, the fourth paragraph. You know, if we have this expansion and we have some understanding, what are you going to do with it then? How does that change you? And maybe that's one of the major things to consider. How does it change us?
I am not able to think about cosmo-consciousness or expansion of consciousness separated from the experience of perception, para-perception. In this case, I think that it means the way I perceive myself, the way I can perceive other consciousness. And this seems to be fundamental to understand. In terms of consciential metrology, the perception of one's trait, of my traits, of my personality, the perception of the personality of another person, it's very, very important. And cosmo-consciousness seems to be a maximum possibility to perceive consciousness, to perceive the cosmos. I understand that when we talk about cosmo-consciousness, this cosmos means a lot of consciousness. It's an other consciousness. So it means for me to perceive other people, to perceive extra-physical consciousnesses, to perceive myself altogether, right? So it's something, it seems to be something simple, to perceive other consciousness, to perceive my consciousness. It's simple, but it's not easy. It's not easy to really perceive, to have a clear perception, okay? And consciential metrology is to, for me, it means to reach the precise measure, the best measure, the best perception, the best self-perception, the best perception of other people, and to make and to make sense and to develop meaning in this perception. So I think that it's important for us to translate this conception in terms of clear concepts for us to understand cosmic consciousness. So I like to think about perception.
Yep. And halfway down the page, there's this comment: every human animal carries within themselves a human consciousness. So you got this massive expansion, understanding consciousness through experiences of cosmic consciousness, and then we've got this challenge of being a human animal that is conditioning our human consciousness. So there's kind of a juxtaposition in how we see ourselves in a way to go forward. But we're gonna move on to the next chapter because we're down to the last 10 minutes of the talk. So we're gonna keep rolling. Mashiko, tell me what you think about this one, and please, guys out there, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so jump in at any time, but this is personally one of my favorite chapters of 700 experiment of this section, sorry, and that's practical principles of conscientiology. And what Professor Waldo has done is he's given 10 principles, right, of conscientiology, but in very short phrases in his style, very succinct, but it synthesizes certain things and gives you a practical tool to be able to get through everyday life, you know. And so from a practical, because I'm a very practical person, from a practical perspective, this is just excellent tool. So I'd like to hear from everybody which of these, and I'm sorry I'm on the wrong chapter, which of these kind of call out to you that you kind of connect with, and why, you know? Feel free to share your experiences.
I want to tell something. For me, very interesting about the cosmic consciousness, because I have some different experience. I'm coming now. Some years ago, I went to a Buddhist monastery in Sri Lanka, and I stayed some days with the nuns, Buddhist nuns, and with meditation practice. I have different experience, okay, I'm new here. Then it was amazing. But they have a very different way to behave, very friendly, very simple. And I have to give attention to one thing when speaking about cosmic consciousness, because for me it was very impressive, because I came from Western country. But one nun, she was eating we are giving food, then she was eating very calm, very quiet. But at the same time, my impression was the consciousness of this nun is not only in her body, it's not here. We could be able to understand how that practice of meditation was giving them deep connection with the life, with the universe. Then when I saw this one, I read before, but I didn't think about my experience with this. Then very interesting. She was eating calmly and very friendly, very happy girl, talking normally, and normal person. But when that time when we are giving the things for them, eating very calmly, and she was not there. Only her body. Her mind was much more than that. Just this, I wanted to. It was like what give me attention according my life experience.
Oh, that's great. That's great. It reminds us of the saying, you know, have your feet on the ground and your head in the cosmos.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
very interesting.
And that has a lot to do with cosmo consciousness and making something practical with that, like put it into your life, put the understandings and the learnings into life, and not become isolated from life. Be here, be present, but incorporate everything you can and put it into the life. I think that's the challenge. So it's a nice experience you had. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Pamela. Anybody else want to share?
Hi, I've got a question about number 1. So if in doubt, abstain. And I just think it would be so easy to abstain your entire life. You know what I mean? Like you could just sit there saying, oh, I'm not sure what to do. And so I disagree with that one respectfully. But I'm just curious about your take on it.
It doesn't say abstain forever.
And it doesn't say stay in doubt forever and do nothing. But it's like sometimes there's, you know, like here it goes on to talk, you know, you have a doubt about a certain most serious decision concerning your destiny. So we're talking about big stuff, not like, should I have a drink now? Should I have a drink later? Oh, no, you know, like we don't necessarily have to go to extremes before we move. Some people have to, but this is more about that big stuff. If you don't have a sense of confidence and conviction and a vision that future that you understand is in that direction, don't do it.
But
you know,
here's my question. Doesn't everything concern our destiny ultimately?
But is it a most serious decision concerning your destiny?
Potentially. Okay, maybe not.
Sorry to ruin your argument, but
yeah, okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. Anybody else? We do have one more chapter, so we'll move on. But if you want to go back and comment on something,
And don't forget, you know, you've got the forum to put any questions, queries, put everything there that we haven't been able to get through today.
So let's continue our discussion for sure. Okay, and the last chapter, test of your heuristic consciousness. So what did this chapter mean to you? What was it? What was significant about it? You know, what connections were you able to make?
For me, this one it's really strong, and it actually positions and should give you a lot of confidence in your self-research. But it's, you know, heuristic is referring to a practical method to solve problems or to learn. But the author really goes in and he gives science and some scientists quite a hard time with this chapter. And I don't know what arguments and escape they'll try to organize for themselves, because some of the things are pretty strong. Like conventional science with its decaying physicalist paradigm sees life in the universe in an absurd and irrational way, as a mechanism destitute of consciousness. There are scientists maintaining an anti-scientific mentality of science without consciousness. He's kind of, it's pretty heavy hitting, at least in my view, towards us. And here, look at this last comment in number 15. Scientific arrogance, or maybe it's scientific arrogance, scientific arrogance empowers a consciousness towards post-somatic parapsychosis and extra-physical melancholy. I don't know. For me, it's kind of serious. It's a serious challenge to the paradigm, and it very much positions conscientiology in relation to conventional science and so on, and perhaps helps us to value appropriately the challenge. We talked about counterflow before, you know, the challenge of the counterflow that can come from some quarters. So it should I think give us a lot of confidence as individuals in dealing with this new line of research and self-experimentation and self-research. That's the way I sort of choose to use this particular chapter. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's It's not that Professor Waldo didn't agree with the scientific approach. To the contrary, Conscientiology was built on a scientific approach. But he's just making a delineation between conventional science and the whole omission of studying the consciousness and including that. And it's just
definitely like dealing with absolute truths, which conventional scientists tend to do, to deal with relative truths that include consciousness and multidimensionality, which is, something which indigenous cultures have talked about for centuries, and not because they're superstitious and don't know what they're talking about, but because it's just a natural part of the human condition. So it's kind of a challenge, but it's kind of a challenge for those who choose to be closed and narrow, but kind of an invitation to, let's reevaluate what's possible to research in a scientific way.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Our time is up.
Yeah, I think we're coming to the end. So if anyone has any more comments or questions, please do post it on the forum site, and we'll continue our discussion of the first section. Just a reminder for everyone, so next month we will have our second meeting with different facilitators. So please read the chapters for the next sections coming up.
Do your best.
Do your best. No pressure. So
but they have to use we have to use our willpower to do that, because it's a lot of chapters, because in the beginning we had only 7 chapters, so each chapter is 1 page, so imagining the next one is, I don't know how many chapters.
And theoricity.
Yeah.
And perhaps also, now that you know a little bit how the meetings are going to be, perhaps you can come prepared with certain questions or certain ideas that you want to talk about. So feel free to elaborate and expose your thoughts and so on more. And don't forget the forum that's always there as well.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely, this is the first one. So please give our feedback. There is a place on the website where you can go in there and put a rating in there, put some comments. We welcome all feedback. So please do that. And hopefully we can hear more from everybody else. We're tired of hearing ourselves talk. So hopefully we'll have a lot more participation. And
great.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good day wherever you are.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Everyone.